Hey guys, Hector here from StrongestHec.com with this week's rendition of Movement Monday. So this is our second episode. The first episode we went over shoulder stability and how to improve core stability and shoulder mobility all in one movement series. So today we're going to be continuing along with episode 1, we're going to be focusing on the hips today. So the hips and the shoulders, they form what we call the four corners, or the four knots. And so the tighter that these knots come together through this virtual X, right? So that my left shoulder is attached to my right hip, and my right shoulder is attached to my left hip. So the tighter that we get these four corners, the stronger we'll be, the more mobile we'll be, the more resilient we'll be. So the thing we're going to be focusing on today is our hips, and we're going to focus on one exercise that's very common. Is called the goblet squat. So we're going to go over a few different, one specific way that we can work on mobilizing the hip, and we're going to start quadruped. We're always going to start unloaded. So it's always good to start with any exercise with no weight. That way you can go through the technique, but also anytime you restore new ranges of motion, like if you improve shoulder mobility or if you improve ankle mobility, whatever, you always want to then back it up with weighted, okay? So you never want to take a movement pattern that really doesn't move that well and then start loading it. So learning how to squat from the top down is actually the incorrect way to learn to squat, because as children, when we were 9 months old and a year old, we didn't actually learn to squat that way. We learned to squat from the ground up. So what we're going to do is we're going to start in this quadruped position. Okay, so for this one here, we're going to tuck our toes. You can definitely plant your toes if you want to, but for the sake of working on the squat pattern today, we're going to have our toes tucked. So when I'm in this position, I'm unweighted. So this pattern right here is the exact same pattern if you were to be in a squat, okay, except I'm unloaded. So all you're going to do is gently begin to rock back and forth, and what you're doing here is you're trying to find where your end range is of your hips. So let's say you kind of get stuck right here, and if you go further, you'll notice that your back may start to round. So that's what that will look like when you're trying to use any kind of barbell squat or even a kettlebell squat. So you'll want to find that end range and just stay there and own that. Focus on breathing, and eventually over time that will start to open up, and you'll be able to completely sit back all the way towards your ankles. Your hamstrings will make contact with your calves. That's ultimately where you want to get. You may or may not get there depending on your history, if you've got any serious injuries or anything like that. But that's what we're going to focus on today. So I'm going to turn this way. And all you're doing is you're going to keep your neck neutral. You don't have to crank your neck up and look straight ahead. Just keep your neck neutral. You can focus your eyes about 6 to 10 feet out in front. And you're just going to gently do these rocking motions back and forth, just like this. Now you can definitely plant your feet if you wanted to. That way you can work both ends of the flexion. You can work dorsiflexion, which is flexing your toes back, and you work on plantar flexion, which is pointing your toes. Okay, so it's always good to be able to do both of these. Okay, so for the squat, we're going to do this because we're going to be squatting. So you're going to inhale forward, and you're going to exhale as you push back towards your ankles. And I recommend doing anywhere from like 10 to 15 of these. You can do them in between like a squat workout, or you can do them just as a morning recharge. You get up in the morning, and it's a great way to open up the hips. It's also going to improve your posture because you have to keep your chest up and your head up, and that naturally corrects your posture. So if you notice, if I start to drop my head, it rounds my upper back. But as soon as I pick my head up like so, my posture, my upper back corrects. Okay? So always start there. Now that we have an idea of where our hip mobility is, we're now going to load ourselves with the kettlebell. And we're going to start from the ground up because that is how we learn to squat as a child. So we're going to have the bell. I recommend putting the bell on the floor, having the handle facing away from you. And then from here, you're just going to line the bell up with pretty much with your belly button, okay? And you're going to step 1 foot at a time. 1, 2, you'll be straddling the bell. You're going to grab it by the horns, and then you're going to curl it to your chest. And then you'll be in this bottom position of the squat, okay? Great thing about using the kettlebell, even a dumbbell, you can do this with a dumbbell too, but you'll get the most benefits with the kettlebell, is it allows you to give yourself a counterbalance. So maybe if you feel like you're going to fall backwards, just move the bell out in front, okay? I'm going to turn to the side. I straddle, I pull the bell to my chest, keep my head up, take my chin and pull my chin back, okay? And then I'm just going to begin to move and work at prying at my hips. Imagine you have like a pencil, like underneath your hips here, and you're trying to draw the number 8, okay? So you're here and you're trying to draw the number 8. It's going to help to pry and open up the hips. So think of it as like you have a concrete post that's stuck in the ground. You wouldn't be able to just pull that post out of the floor, out of the ground, right? You'd have to move it, wiggle it around, and pry at the post to get it to come up. Exact same thing that we're doing with our hips. What this does is this creates space in the joint, and that allows us to move, to take that joint through its full range of motion. So one of the key aspects of improving your mobility is using your strength, okay? So strength and mobility, they're not mutually exclusive. So you can't have strength without mobility, because you've got to be able to go through a particular range of motion to take advantage of that strength that you have. And then on the other side, you need to use your strength to access ranges of motion in your mobility. So you've got to do both. You can't have one without the other. So one of the things we're going to focus on to close out this series is your hip flexors, the muscles that are on top of your thigh that bring your knee to your chest when you're walking. Those muscles are responsible for flexing your hip. So we're going to use those muscles to actively pull ourselves down. That's going to create space in the joint. That's going to be able to spread the load throughout our body, and that's going to make us more efficient squatters. Okay, so the squat is the most fundamental of the movement patterns that we have. It's something that we've had since childhood, and it's something that we should never lose. So going through this little sequence here is definitely going to help restore any lost function that we have in that pattern. So I'm going to show you how we're going to be pulling down with our hip flexors. It's very subtle, but you'll be able to see me actively pull my hips to the floor. So I'm going to turn to the side, and we're going to go through our setup just like normal. Okay, I'm going to pull the belt to my chest, and then I'm right here. Now, I'm going to actively use my hip flexors, and I'm going to pull down. Watch. Breathe, and I'm going to do it again. And then once you find that end range, push the knees open a little bit, pry, and do it again. And you can go through as many of those little active pull downs, probably 3 to 5. Create that space, move around, cycle a couple of breaths through, and you'll be good to go. So give this a try. This would be really great before you're going to go through any kind of squat training with your bells, or even with a barbell. But you can also do this just as like an active recovery day. Maybe you have a set schedule of training Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesdays and Thursdays, this is something that you can do in between. It's going to help improve and boost your recovery. So that's all I got for you guys this week. Give that a try. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave it in the comment section below. If you're loving this series, you're loving these videos, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you got any questions, like I said, leave it in the comment section below.